If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten stories hidden within Britain's motoring past, consider joining us for the journey. I still remember the Britain these cars belonged to, a Britain of damp winter mornings, crowded high streets, factory whistles, and families loading suitcases into a boot before setting off for a long-awaited holiday. The 1970s were difficult years. Inflation was rising, strikes dominated headlines. Yet for millions of people, owning a car remained a symbol of progress, independence, and pride. These weren't exotic machines reserved for the wealthy. They were the cars parked outside terraced houses, sitting in supermarket car parks, and waiting patiently in suburban driveways. For a brief moment, they seemed to be everywhere. Today, many have almost vanished.
Number 10. Austin Maxi. When the Austin Maxi arrived in 1969, it carried enormous expectations. Built by British Leyland, it was designed as a practical family hatchback, long before hatchbacks became fashionable. With its 5-door body, fold-flat seats, and spacious interior, it promised a glimpse of the future. Families appreciated its practicality. For growing households watching every penny, the Maxi offered versatility that few rivals could match. A 1.5-liter engine, later expanded to 17 liters, provided modest performance while keeping costs manageable. Yet ownership often proved frustrating. Early gearboxes were notoriously awkward, build quality could be inconsistent, and reliability concerns became familiar topics around dinner tables and garages. Many owners loved the space, but tolerated the flaws. The Maxi became a common sight across Britain, but its reputation never quite matched its ambition. And compared with what came next, its problems seemed relatively mild.
Number 9 is the Morris Marina. If any car captured the everyday reality of 1970s Britain, it was the Marina. Launched in 1971, the Marina was intended to challenge the popular Ford Cortina. Available as a saloon, estate, coupe, and van, it seemed to offer something for everyone. At first glance, buyers saw reassuring familiarity, simple styling, straightforward engineering, affordable prices. The Marina became a favorite among families, company fleets, and driving instructors. Britain seemed filled with them. But beneath the practicality lurked serious shortcomings. Handling was widely criticized, steering felt outdated, and quality control varied dramatically. Owners often accepted these flaws because alternatives weren't always affordable. For many families, the Marina wasn't a dream car, it was simply the car they could get. Yet another vehicle was quietly becoming even more deeply woven into British life.
Number 8 is the Hillman Avenger. The Avenger arrived in 1970 and quickly established itself as a dependable family choice. Produced by Roots Group before eventually becoming part of Chrysler UK, it offered modern styling and respectable performance. Its engines ranged from 1.2 to 1.5 liters, delivering sensible economy during a decade increasingly concerned with fuel costs. The Avenger appealed to ordinary working families. It looked contemporary without appearing extravagant. It felt attainable. On rainy mornings and busy school runs, it became a trusted companion. But rust was its relentless enemy. Wheel arches, sills, and body panels often deteriorated alarmingly quickly. Many perfectly serviceable Avengers disappeared not because their engines failed, but because corrosion consumed them. Thousands quietly vanished from Britain's roads. And the next car would become one of the most recognizable family vehicles of the entire decade.
Number 7 is the Ford Cortina. Strictly speaking, the Cortina wasn't British-owned by the 1970s, but few cars were more deeply embedded in British culture. The Mark III Cortina arrived in 1970 with American-inspired styling and broad appeal. By the middle of the decade, it seemed impossible to drive through any town without seeing one. For families climbing the social ladder, the Cortina represented success. It wasn't luxurious, but it felt respectable. A promotion at work often meant a better Cortina parked outside. Available with engines ranging from modest 4 cylinders to larger units, it offered choices for nearly every budget. The car became a fixture of everyday life. But its sheer popularity created an unexpected fate.
Most Cortinas were driven hard, traded frequently, and eventually scrapped when rust took hold. What was once one of Britain's most common sights has become surprisingly rare. And now we arrive at a car that symbolized aspiration itself.
Number 5 is the Rover SD1. When the SD1 appeared in 1976, it looked like it had arrived from the future. Its sleek hatchback profile drew comparisons with exotic Italian designs. It was bold, modern, and dramatically different from traditional British executive cars. The public was captivated. Winning European Car of the Year in 1977 only strengthened its reputation. For many buyers, owning an SD1 represented achievement. It suggested status, progress, and confidence. Yet beneath the striking bodywork lay familiar British Leyland problems. Build quality inconsistencies, electrical faults, and production issues tarnished what should have been a triumph. Owners often found themselves admiring the car while simultaneously battling its shortcomings. The SD1 showed how close Britain sometimes came to greatness, but the next car belonged to a very different world.
Number 4 is the Mini. By the 1970s, the Mini was already a national institution. Designed by Alec Isigonis years earlier, it remained one of the smartest automotive designs ever produced. Compact outside, surprisingly spacious inside. For students, young couples, retirees, and city drivers, the Mini offered mobility at a price people could afford. It became woven into everyday British life. Children grew up riding in them. Parents learned to drive in them. Entire generations formed memories around them. Yet, Minis lived hard lives. Many were inexpensive secondhand purchases, maintenance was often delayed, rust attacked relentlessly. As newer cars arrived, countless Minis disappeared. The survivors now feel less like old cars and more like treasured pieces of social history. But one vehicle managed to become even more symbolic of family Britain. Number 3 is the Austin Allegro. Few cars inspire stronger reactions than the Allegro. Launched in 1973, it was supposed to replace the beloved Austin 1100 and 1300 range. British Leyland hoped it would become the perfect family car for a changing decade. Expectations were enormous. Early advertising promised comfort, innovation, and practicality. Buyers responded enthusiastically. For a time, Allegros were everywhere. Yet criticism arrived quickly. Styling divided opinion, build quality concerns persisted. The famous square-shaped steering wheel became an enduring source of debate. Many families bought Allegros believing they represented sensible modern motoring. Some remained loyal, others felt disappointed. Today, their rarity feels astonishing considering how common they once were. Yet 2 cars remain that defined the decade even more completely.
Number 2 is the Morris Minor. Although introduced decades earlier, the Minor remained a familiar presence well into the 1970s. It represented continuity in a rapidly changing Britain. Older owners trusted it because they understood it. Mechanics knew how to repair it. Spare parts remained plentiful. The Minor was never about prestige. It was about reliability, familiarity, and comfort. Across villages, market towns, and suburban streets, it continued serving faithfully long after many expected it to retire. Eventually, modern traffic and changing expectations pushed it aside. But for countless Britons, the Minor wasn't merely transportation. It was part of the family.
And finally, we arrive at number 1, the car that truly seemed to be everywhere, the Austin Morris 1100 and 1300. By the early 1970s, these cars dominated Britain's roads. Developed under the British Motor Corporation and later absorbed into British Leyland, they became one of Britain's best-selling vehicle families. They were practical, economical, and remarkably space-efficient. For young families, ownership often represented a major milestone. Savings were sacrificed, budgets were stretched, but the reward was freedom. Weekend outings, holiday journeys, visits to relatives, ordinary moments that became lifelong memories. The 1100 and 1300 weren't glamorous. They didn't need to be. They succeeded because they understood exactly what ordinary people needed. Yet, like so many cars of the era, rust, age, and relentless use eventually erased them from the landscape. Today, seeing one feels like encountering a ghost from another Britain. A Britain that moved at a gentler pace. A Britain of corner shops, factory shifts, seaside holidays, and family drives through the countryside. These cars were never merely machines. They carried hopes, ambitions, worries, and memories. They witnessed first jobs, family arguments, wedding journeys, and final farewells. They became silent companions to millions of ordinary lives. Most have disappeared now, but their stories remain woven into Britain's history. I'd love to know which of these cars you remember most, or which one your family owned. Share your memories in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring the forgotten stories behind Britain's motoring past, consider subscribing for more journeys into the cars that shaped an era. Because in our next film, we'll uncover the British cars that once promised the future, but couldn't survive it.